Everyone. And it's nice to see you out here because, winter came back. You know, in this part of Canada, in this part of the Rockies, there are only three seasons. There's winter, there's not winter, and there's construction. So it's nice to have this many folks show up on a tough day. The roads are terrible. So, Pastor Sean had asked me to take this Sunday. We're kicking off a series that Pastor Sean had looked up for us, and it's called Is It Okay for a Christian to blank? And then he asked you to send in responses. Is it okay for a Christian to blank? Send in responses. And that's what the series is built around. And I get to kick off the series this morning with an interesting one. Is it okay for a Christian to doubt? Is it okay for a Christian to doubt? Well, there's a model. I don't know if we can get it up on the screen from Church and Culture blog. All right. Our source for everything in these questions is the Bible. So I'll give you a hand diagram. There's a little box. In that little box, it says prohibition, permission, principles. And then there's a little arrow that goes down. And it's another little box, and it says freedom. And from that box, it goes over to wisdom, and then it goes over to witness. So when it comes to this question, this is a template, and here we go, from Church and Culture blog. So permission, prohibition, principles, down to freedom. And then we have to work from our freedom to understand wisdom and witness. So we're going to be looking at that this morning. Is it okay for a Christian to doubt? Well, it was about 3 weeks ago, Pastor Sean was up here speaking, and all of a sudden, his tablet went dead. And I could see the heart just in his chest, and I felt so empathetic for him. Your notes are gone, and he's got a sermon to bring. Well, thanks to the tech team, because they do marvelous work. They got it fixed, and Pastor Sean got to speak. You get my point? I brought hand-typed out notes. And there's a reason for that. It's an object lesson for you. But like trust, doubt has a target. So the question, is it okay to doubt, should actually be, is it okay to doubt God? That is what we're going to look at this morning. So I'm going to start by bringing forward to you, which will be a précis of this whole sermon. Of everything I've got to say, take away this. It's 2 verses from the Bible, and it's one of my most favorite verses. It's also so extremely challenging, and it's delightful, and it's instructive, and it's useful. And it's Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. Some translations have it, submit. In all your ways, submit to him, and he will direct your paths. If nothing else, memorize those 2 verses. That's the summary of everything I have to bring to you this morning. When it comes to doubt, who are you doubting? What is it you're doubting, and why? So I'd like to put a quote up on the screen for you. This is from Charles Spurgeon. He's been called the Prince of Preachers. And this is what he said in commenting on Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Faith is reason at rest in God. That's very poignant. Faith is reason at rest in God. I see Gary smiling. I use the word poignant too often, he tells me, when I'm speaking, so that's just one. That's just one. There's another quotation I'd like to give you straight out of the Bible because that's our source, and it's Isaiah 8, verses 8 and 9. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, and neither are my ways your ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Keep those two in your mind, and we're going to go back to Proverbs, because we are told to trust in God with all our hearts. And so as we unpack this a little bit, it's that nasty word all. All. That means all. 100%. But in there, there's that connector, that word and. And so we have to understand we're supposed to couple this trust in God with all, 100% of our hearts. And here's the kicker: lean not on your own understanding. And that's the important qualifier. We're starting to look at doubt. Lean not on your own understanding. And that, I will suggest, is a very tough assignment, because we live in a culture that just admires and tells us we're self-autonomous. You decide for yourself. You are the boss of you. You do what you want, when you want, how you want. You are free to do. This flies in the face of that. Trust in God with all your heart, and don't lean on your own understanding. So, doubt. If one has doubt and invokes your doubt, somehow, in some way, your own understanding has started to sneak in. And the needle starts to move from all to 97 to 95 to 92, and on it goes. You're moving the needle, and it starts with my understanding. Trust in the Lord, my understanding saying, wait a minute. So you have a problem. The needle's moving. All has disappeared. Well, if we look again at the next verse, and there's that nasty word all again, and it says, in all your ways. Not all except this one that I'm going to bring to you right now, God, because I don't get it. No, it says in all your ways. So the minute all and that needle gets moved again, your doubt is reducing all of my ways to just about all of my ways. But I got this issue, and that needle's drifting, and now doubt, and it's a nasty thing, doubt, starts to take up room in your heart and in your life and in your relationship with God. Finally, there's a real tough direction. This is under the principles, and it's a tough direction. But here you go. It says, in all your ways, submit to him, and he will direct your paths. Submit, acknowledge. You are not the boss of you. You are not self-autonomous. God created you for a relationship with him. And doubt, if it gets in there, moves the needle. And you're going to say, God, in this particular instance, at this moment right now, my all is down around 97, and it's drifting even further. And doubt has crept in, and it's getting between your relationship with you and with God, and you're leaning on your own understanding. Now, something we have to be very careful to understand, we're talking to a Christian, is it okay to doubt? What you've got to understand is that doubt is different from unbelief. Doubt and unbelief are two different things. Doubt, the antonym for it, the opposite, I went to 4 different dictionaries. The opposite of doubt always comes up with trust. The antonym, trust. I want to quote to you from Os Guinness, his book, God in the Dark. There we go. Unbelief and doubt are different things. Unbelief is a willful choice not to believe, even after the questions have been answered. A willful decision of the mind, even after the questions have been answered. I want you to think on that, because we're going to take a look at one of the patriarchs in the Bible to help us understand this, after the questions have been answered. There's another quote that I'd like you to pay some attention to. It's from Terry Eagleton. It's from his book, Reason, Faith, and Revolution, Reflections on the God Debate. That's a mouthful. He's the professor at McGill University for the Office of Spiritual Life. And here you go. Is doubt destructive of faith? Faith and doubt, by definition, coexist and they work in tandem. A proposition you couldn't doubt wouldn't be a matter of faith. Brain cramp? A proposition you couldn't doubt wouldn't be a matter of faith. And if you take a look in Mark chapter 9, it's verses 17 to 27. Father comes to God. His son has been going into convulsions, throws himself in the fire. He's had all kinds of trouble trying to keep the boy alive even. And he looks at Christ and he says, listen, if you can you heal him? And Christ looks back at him and says, if I can. All things are possible for those who believe. And the man replies, yes, I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. There is a tension between doubt and faith, and it will exist in every believer's life at some time. I have had my doubts, and then I did this. It hurt a lot, but it's worthwhile. You see, doubt and faith coexist. We are constantly in a battle, principalities and powers. There's a man called Satan who doesn't want us to have trust and faith. So these things will start coming in. Go back to Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. The question is, and it's really well raised by Dr. John Neufeld. He does the Back to the Bible series, and he says it this way: doubt is part of our lives. However, the real question is, what do you do with doubt? Well, that falls under the principles and the freedom, and that's what we're going to look at. What do you do with doubt, if and when you doubt? Well, there's a good strategy that needs to be put in place. And I read this. It's a great quote. It's not on the tech machine there. This is from Sarah Young, who wrote a devotional book called Jesus is Calling. And it's part of our day-to-day struggle as believers, but this is one way to deal with doubt. She says it like this: put Christ in the forefront of your consciousness. Put Christ in the forefront of your consciousness. You can think of another book, perhaps it was written by Brother Lawrence, Practicing the Presence of God. Put Christ in the forefront of your consciousness. Because if you do, and this is where it becomes so fundamentally important, because if you do, you will remember and you'll dwell on the characteristics of the God you've come to know. The God you've come to know. What you've read in the Bible, what you now understand, what you see and hear when you come to a meeting like this with others around you, and you come to realize you are doubting God, the character of God. So we'll take a moment and just look at what is the character of God. 1 John 4:8. God is love. We know that. God is love. And then there's the three omnis. God is omnipresent, he's omnipotent, and he's omniscient. He knows everything. The three omnis. But we can throw in more. He's merciful, he's gracious, he's holy, he's perfect, he's trustworthy, he's just. And here's a tough one for me to understand. He's patient. Keep some of those things, and you can add more of those adjectives of God's character on your own. But keep some of those things in mind. And something else that'll be pretty sobering for you is that if you've got doubt, it's not surprising God. He knows about it already. He's omniscient. He knows. So, we're talking about looking at doubt. Here is another quote from you, or from Paul Tripp for you. It's from his book called The trap of doubt. This is a long one. It's a little wordy, but I want to read it all. Okay. Here's why doubt is such a deadly trap. As soon as you begin to question the character of God, you'll quit running to him for help because you don't go for help to someone that you do not trust. And if you no longer believe God is loving, faithful, gracious, you won't turn to him for hope and peace. You're moving the needle. And instead, you seek out earthly saviors who will provide the supposed rest and comfort you think you need. And this could be such things as drugs, people, television, food, and a host of other numbing agents. They all fall under idols. I'm going to quote Dr. Neufeld again. Doubt is part of our lives. However, the real question is, what do you do with doubt? Well, Sarah Young, Brother Lawrence, they've given us a good start, but we're going to take a look at 3 well-known characters in the Bible to help us understand what to do with doubt. And there are lots more. You can think on Abraham and Sarah, Moses, David in so many of the Psalms, Jeremiah, Isaiah. One of my favorite books is Ecclesiastes, Solomon. How does it start? Meaningless, meaningless. Everything is utterly meaningless. That's some serious questioning and doubt. But if you go to the end, Ecclesiastes 12, verse 13, this is how it ends. For now all has been seen and heard. Here's the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments. So, we're going to take a look at 3 characters, and the first we're going to look at is John the Baptist. And I'm going to read to you from Matthew 3, 16 to 17. You got to understand, John the Baptist has been out baptizing and speaking. He was the first evangelist going throughout Judea. And Jesus comes to him to be baptized. Here you go, Matthew 3, 16 and 17. At that moment, as soon as Jesus was baptized, he went up out of the water. And at that moment, heaven was opened, and he, John the Baptist, saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting on him. And a voice from heaven said, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased." Baptized Christ, saw the dove come down, heard the voice, John the Baptist. Now, we're going to move to the book of John, and this is John the disciple recounting to us what John the Baptist saw and says. This is John 1, 29 to 34. Then John gave this testimony. I saw the Spirit from heaven, come down from heaven as a dove and remain on him. I myself did not know him, but the one who sent me to baptize with water told me, the man on whom you see the Spirit come down and remain is the one who will baptize with the Holy Spirit. I have seen and I testify that this is God's chosen one. John the Baptist. I have seen and I testify this is God's chosen one. John the Baptist. Well, sometime later, the Bible doesn't specifically give us the timeline, but you can take the context that it's during Christ's Galilean ministry, so it's somewhere between 2 and 3 years later. John the Baptist has been imprisoned by Herod, and he's languishing in jail. He doesn't get out there. He's by himself. Matthew 11, 2 to 6, John the Baptist. When John, who was in prison, heard about the deeds of the Messiah, he sent his disciples to ask him, "Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else?" And Jesus replied, "Go back and report to John what you hear and see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor. Blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me." I have seen and testified that this is God's chosen one. Sometime during his prison, sends people to say, hey, are you the one? John had doubts. And the key point here, Christ was very poignant and sent it back. Key point here is to remember what God has done in your life, what he's still doing and what he will do. You got to remember what God has done. So I'd like to throw up another quote for you from Dr. Charles Swindoll. He's at the Dallas Theological Seminary. And in his study of this passage of Matthew's, he has something really interesting to say. What do you do with your doubts? And most people are afraid to admit them, thinking they'll shove us out of God's favor. John the Baptizer expressed his doubts openly and with emotion, which gives us hope when we doubt. What do we learn from John the Baptist? We learn, one, we have got to remember what Christ has done in our life, what he's doing in our life, and what you see going on around you, which is why it's so important on Sunday to come to church. Carry each other's burdens. You got some doubt? You can talk to your friends about it. You can listen to your pastor, Sean, speak, and that'll start to take away those doubts and the needle will get moved. But you need to remember what God has done, and you need to admit your doubts. Are you the one who is to come, or is there another? Remember and admit. And now we're going to move from John the Baptist to probably the most recognized example of doubt in the Bible. And his name is the disciple, Doubting Thomas. Interesting, Doubting Thomas. And he was a disciple. This is from John 20. And here's the scene. Christ has appeared to the disciples, but Thomas wasn't with them when Christ appeared. So it goes like this. Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples said to him, we have seen the Lord. But he said to them, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. Thomas, the disciple. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and this time Thomas was with them. And though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. And then he said to Thomas, put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. The words of Christ. Stop doubting and believe. And Thomas said to him, my Lord and my God. And then Jesus told him something that it excites me, and I hope it excites you. He said, because you have seen me, you have believed. But blessed are those who have not seen me and yet have believed. That's everybody in this room. I haven't seen him in the words and senses of my eyes, but I've seen and experienced him. Blessed are you. Now you got to understand, this is the Thomas who just previously in the ministry of Christ, when Christ said, I hear my friend Lazarus is sick, so we're going to go back and visit him. And Thomas speaks up because they had just left Jerusalem and they had tried to kill Jesus. At Bethany, where they're headed, is just outside Jerusalem. And Thomas, John 11:16 says this, then Thomas, who is called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. Thomas is a perfect example for us of the tension that can exist between faith and doubt. Let us go. Well, we can die with him. Well, I'm not going to believe unless you do this. It's the same man that walked with Christ for 3.5 years. He was convinced. And now he says unless. Well, both Thomas and John have admitted their doubts. Christ has admonished John to say, hey, remember what's going on. Thomas, if you read this again, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand to his side, I will not believe. Thomas puts conditions on his doubt. Unless I see. And this shows the great patience of God. Why I wanted to harp on that word, patience. If you go to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and it lists out the descriptors of what love is, the first one, it's patient. Love is patient, kind, protects, trusts, hopes, perseveres, and is truthful. Patient. And I'm thankful that God is patient. And so is Thomas, and so is John the Baptist. You don't put conditions. However, in God's great love and patience, he just looks at Thomas, and he will look at you, and he'll meet you where you are with your doubt, and he will walk along with you through it. But do not put conditions. God is not a genie in a bottle. You don't rub him and get 3 wishes, but you can bring requests and prayer to him. So I'm thankful for patience. In your doubt, you need to exercise some of it, and remember that God will meet you where you are, like he did with Thomas, and he says, stop doubting and believe. It's interesting to note, though, when he said, put your finger here, etc., we're not told that that took place. Actually, what we're told is just that upon Christ's appearing and saying those words, Thomas blurts out, my Lord and my God. He got a little jolted and went, stop doubting and believe indeed. So we need to remember, but you also need to trust and understand that God will come and meet you in your doubt if you ask. Don't put conditions. Don't try the patience of God. So if we put these 2 stories together, we got John the Baptist and we got doubting Thomas. There's some stuff we can understand quickly and learn about doubt. Number 1, you admit the doubt to yourself and you admit it to God. Yes, he knows already, but you admit it. Say, God, I got some doubt on whatever it is. Then pause and start to remember what Christ has done in your life, what you've seen him do in lives of others, and what you see going on around you when you come to a place like this. So admit it, remember it, and then don't make conditions, but do make requests. And we're going to look at this shortly, a little deeper. You can make requests. And there are other things that we can learn about doubt from these 2 men. So the first one is this. Doubt grows in isolation. John the Baptist was in prison 2, maybe 3 years by himself, isolated from his friends, his fellow believers. He's just trying to figure out what's going on, but he's by himself. Thomas, we don't know why, wasn't with the others when Christ first appeared. It's a tumultuous time in their lives. Christ has been crucified, now they're here, and he's risen from the grave. Thomas was by himself. Doubt will grow in isolation. So again, you got some doubts, come to a place like this. Listen to the pastor speak. Read your Bible. Talk to others. And you can move the needle. Doubt grows in isolation. Another thing we can learn is that doubt will draw you back to Christ. One more quote from you. This is by Dr. David Jeremiah. It's from his book called Slaying the Giant of Doubt. If we express our doubts clearly to the Almighty God in prayer, if we read the 4 Gospels carefully about his life, if we examine the evidence that is available to us, it will not draw us to the right answers. It will draw us to the right person, and that person is Jesus Christ, in whom you've put your trust. Doubt grows in isolation. Doubt can draw you back to Christ, and now doubt has the potential to deepen your faith. This is the 3rd person from the Bible that I wanted to bring up, and it's the patriarch Job. Now, Job is stuck in a terrible situation. He's got his 3 friends coming to him, and they are spouting to him a syllogism, and it's close, but it's not accurate, and it says God punishes sin. You're being punished, therefore you sinned. So why don't you fess up, tell us what you did, we'll pray for you, and things might get better between you and God. And Job says, no, I did not do anything. Well, they keep bringing this up to Job. It's like a court trial, accusing him, and him saying no. He runs short of patience, and he gets a little upset, and he starts questioning God about, hey, what's going on here? I haven't done anything. And these guys are accusing me. Now I want some answers. How come? What's going on? Why am I suffering this way? I don't think it's just. I don't think it's fair. And I want you to answer me. I need some answers, please, God. Well, go back and read the book. It's really quite challenging. It's a fantastic piece of the Bible to concentrate on. But there are 37 chapters of this back and forth between Job and his friends, and I didn't do it, and yes, you did, and God, why are... And so it finally ends, and there are 4 chapters. They're 38 to 41. And they're all questions that come from God to Job. I said earlier, remember this, God will meet you where you are in your doubt. So he literally hammers Job. 4 chapters of questions that Job cannot answer a single one. And if you read those 4 chapters, neither can I, neither can you. You can't, because it's God pointing out to his sovereignty, to his omniscience, omniscience, and omnipresence. So it's a litany of questions that go on for 4 chapters. And now in Job 42, verses 2 to 6, Job's quite humbled. And he looks and he says, okay, God, I know you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. And you asked, who is this that obscures my plans without knowledge? And surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. And you said, listen now, and I will speak. I will question you, and you will answer me. Well, my ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. And therefore, I despise myself, and I repent in dust and ashes. Read those 4 chapters. Read those 4 chapters carefully, because none of us can answer those questions. And it's important for you to understand this. Job never got a direct answer to his question in prayer. What he got was a profound and deeper sense of the majesty and the power and the knowledge of God. And he also got the peace of God in the midst of what he was going through. Doubt. It can grow in isolation. It can bring you back to Christ. It can deepen your faith. But, that connecting word, but, means you have to address your doubts. I want you to think again on the patriarch Job. He went through and he addressed his doubts. Now, Dr. Jeremiah says this: if you are struggling with doubts, admit that to yourself. I've got some doubts. And then articulate your doubts clearly. Why do you doubt? Who is it you're doubting? What is it you doubt? And then acknowledge your doubts prayerfully. He puts it this way: turn your doubts into questions, your questions into prayers, and your prayers, turn them to God. What we need to realize, and this is pretty humbling for all of us, what we need to realize is that God always answers prayer. But there are 3 ways in which he answers prayer. 1 is yes, 2 is no, and the 3 is not yet, not right now. We're doing things my way. But he always answers prayer. And whatever the answer is, you've got to realize God's in control, and he is watching over you And your doubts can move the needle. They can even make you anxious, which is a generalized and overwhelming feeling of discomfort or uneasiness, a sense and a feeling of worry, fear, and loss of control. That's what can happen to you. And I want to use this verse for you to go and look at, dwell on it, think on it, memorize it, trust in it. It's Philippians 4, 6, and 7. It said, just like Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 in a different way, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition. And then it says this interesting part, stuck in the middle, with thanksgiving. You got doubts, you worries about something, you're going to pray with thanksgiving? Why thanksgiving? The thanksgiving is because God is loving, merciful, gracious, kind, just, patient. He's omnipotent, he's omniscient, he's omnipresent. God is sovereign. He's bigger than we can understand. He's over all, and he's going to let you come to him with your doubts. You should be thankful and say, Father, okay. With thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Sometimes God says yes, sometimes God says no, and sometimes God says not now, not yet, wait on me. The peace of God. So if you take your doubts in prayer, take them to God, if you admit them and remember, he's going to meet you where you are in your doubt, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your heart and your mind. So I want to close again and reiterate that all I've said to you can be wrapped up in Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. And in all your ways submit to him, and he will direct your paths. That's what you do with doubt. I will leave it with you rather than come out and give you the answer, that you go and contemplate on it. Is it okay for a Christian to doubt God?